Welcome to List of Human Beings Are a Confident Bunch. We've split the atom, mapped the genome, and figured out how to put ranch dressing inside a pizza crust, but history is littered with the corpses of absolute certainties. Today, we're looking at the times the smartest people in the room were dead wrong. These are the experts who looked at the future, puffed out their chests, and said, "Not on my watch." It's the list of times experts were absolutely certain and totally wrong. First up, let's talk about the sky falling, specifically meteorites. In the late 18th century, if you told a member of the French Academy of Sciences that a rock had fallen from space, they would have laughed you out of the building. To the enlightened elite, the idea of stones falling from the heavens was considered peasant superstition or folk nonsense. Even Thomas Jefferson, a man of profound intellect, famously reacted to a report of a meteorite by saying, "I would more easily believe that two Yankee professors would lie than that stones would fall from heaven." It wasn't until a massive meteor shower in Lagal, France, in 1803, which left 3,000 stones scattered across the countryside, that the experts finally admitted, "Okay, fine, the universe is throwing rocks at us." Speaking of the sky, let's talk about flying through it. In 1895, Lord Kelvin, one of the most respected physicists in history, declared heavier-than-air flying machines are impossible. He wasn't some crank. He was the guy the Kelvin temperature scale is named after. He doubled down again in 1902, just 1 year before the Wright brothers took off at Kitty Hawk, saying that neither the balloon nor the aeroplane would ever be a practical success. It seems the only thing Kelvin couldn't calculate was the sheer stubbornness of two brothers from Ohio with a bicycle shop. But at least the air is clean, right? Well, that brings us to germ theory. For centuries, the prevailing expert opinion was miasma theory. If you got sick, it was because of bad air or an imbalance of the four humors. In the mid-1800s, Dr. Ignace Semmelweis noticed that if doctors washed their hands between performing autopsies and delivering babies, the mortality rate plummeted. You'd think the medical community would throw him a parade. Instead, they were insulted. They argued that a gentleman's hands could not possibly transmit disease. Semmelweis was mocked, fired, and eventually ended up in an asylum. It took Joseph Lister and Louis Pasteur decades to convince the experts that invisible monsters were actually the problem. Thousands died simply because hand-washing was beneath the dignity of the experts. If the experts couldn't see germs, they definitely couldn't see the continents moving. In 1912, Alfred Wegener proposed the theory of continental drift. He pointed out that South America and Africa fit together like puzzle pieces and shared the same fossils. The geological community responded with the scientific equivalent of a middle finger. They called his ideas delirious ravings and pseudoscience. They spent 50 years insisting the Earth's crust was solid and immovable. It wasn't until the 1960s, with the discovery of seafloor spreading, that the experts realized Wegener had been right all along. Unfortunately, he had been dead for 30 years by the time they apologized. Lord Kelvin returns to our list for the age of the Earth. In the late 19th century, he calculated that the Earth was between 20 and 40 million years old. He based this on how long it would take a molten ball of rock to cool down. He was absolutely certain. Biologists like Charles Darwin were worried because 40 million years wasn't nearly enough time for evolution to happen. But Kelvin was the physics king, so everyone assumed he was right. What Kelvin didn't know about was radioactivity, the internal heating system of the planet. Today, we know the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. Kelvin was only off by about 4.4 billion years. To be fair, what's a few billion years between friends? Moving into the 20th century, we have the Great Ulcer debate. For decades, if you had a hole in your stomach, the experts told you it was your fault. You were too stressed. You drank too much coffee. You had a type A personality. Doctors prescribed bland diets and milk. In the 1980s, two Australian researchers, Barry Marshall and Robin Warren, discovered that a bacteria called H. pylori was the real culprit. The medical establishment laughed. They said bacteria couldn't survive in stomach acid. To prove them wrong, Barry Marshall did the most mad scientist thing possible. He drank a beaker full of the bacteria, developed a massive ulcer, and then cured himself with antibiotics. He won the Nobel Prize, and millions of people stopped eating boiled fish for no reason. Then there's the blueprint of life itself, DNA. After its discovery, many top scientists were skeptical that DNA could be the carrier of genetic information. They thought it was too boring and simple. They were certain that proteins, with their complex structures, were the real stars of the show. It wasn't until the Hershey-Chase experiments in 1952 that the experts finally admitted that the boring molecule was actually the master code of life. Even the vacuum of space didn't escape the experts' confidence. In 1920, the New York Times published an editorial mocking rocket pioneer Robert Goddard. They claimed that a rocket could never work in space because there was no atmosphere to push against. They literally accused a PhD physicist of lacking the basic knowledge taught in high schools. Goddard spent the rest of his life being called a dreamer and a fool. It wasn't until 1969, the day after Apollo 11 launched toward the moon, that the New York Times finally published a tiny correction stating, "It is now definitely established that a rocket can function in a vacuum." The Times regrets the error. Better late than never, I guess. Finally, we look at the nuclear winter debates of the 1980s. A group of scientists, including Carl Sagan, published papers stating with absolute certainty that even a limited nuclear exchange would lead to a global freeze and the end of all agriculture. While the threat was real, later computer models showed the certainty of the initial predictions was based on oversimplified data. It triggered a massive scientific civil war, with experts calling each other's models faith-based rather than fact-based. It serves as a reminder that even when the stakes are literally the end of the world, experts can still get caught up in the heat or the cold of the moment. The history of progress is really just a history of experts being proven wrong by people who refuse to listen to them. It turns out that absolute certainty is often just a lack of imagination. Thank you for watching this episode of Listoff. If you enjoyed this journey through the halls of human error, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Have a favorite wrong expert we missed? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next one unless, of course, the experts are right and the sky actually is falling this time.